While her husband was in a coma, you've never seen a betrayal like this. Okay, settle in. This isn't one of those light, funny stories. This is heavy. You see the title, you know where this is going, but you don't know the half of it. I'm about to tell you how I signed over my entire life to my wife, my soulmate, minutes before a crash put me in a coma. And what she did while I was lying there, helpless. It's a betrayal so deep, it redefines evil. My revenge had to be just as cold. You know that feeling of being on top of the world? When every piece of your life seems to have clicked into place so perfectly it feels like a movie? That was me. Alex. Just a few years ago, I was the writer, director, and star of my own perfect film. The lead role, of course, was my wife, Elena. If you had seen us, you would have hated us. I get it. We were that couple, the ones with the perfectly renovated brownstone in a leafy part of the city, the tastefully expensive cars, the spontaneous trips to Tuscany. But it wasn't inherited wealth. I'd built my tech consulting firm from the ground up. I'm talking 100-hour weeks, sleeping on a couch in a rented office, living off cheap pizza, and a belief that I could build something that would last. And when I met Elena, it felt like the final, most important piece of that empire clicking into place. She was stunning, of course, the kind of woman who turns heads just by walking into a room. But it was more than that. She was my cheerleader, my confidant, my rock. When I'd come home, my brain fried from a day of brutal negotiations, she'd be there with a glass of scotch and an ear that never seemed to get tired of my rants. She celebrated my wins as if they were her own and soothed the sting of my losses. She was, in my mind, the co-builder of our life. I was the architect, but she was the one who made the house a home. Or so I believed. This particular day, the memory is burned into my brain with the clarity of a high-definition photograph, was perfect. It was a crisp Friday afternoon in late September. The sun was that perfect shade of gold, slanting through the windshield of my new Jaguar as we drove out of the city. We were heading to a celebratory weekend. I'd just closed the biggest deal of my career, a multi-year contract that secured the company's future and then some. I remember the smell of the leather seats, the low hum of the engine, and the sound of Elena's laughter. She was scrolling through her phone, looking at resorts in the Maldives.
Oh my God, Alex, look at this one. An overwater bungalow with a private slide into the ocean. Can you even imagine?
I glanced over at her. The sunlight caught the highlights in her hair. Her smile was radiant. I felt a surge of love and pride so powerful it was almost dizzying. This was what I worked for. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a thick manila folder.
Paperwork? Now? You promised a no-work weekend, mister.
She said it with a playful pout, but her eyes flickered to the folder with an unreadable curiosity. It's not work, babe. It's for us. For the trip, I said, pulling up to a red light. I took out a pen and a single dense document. It's the general power of attorney. We talked about it. With us going away for 3 weeks and that new real estate deal pending, I need someone to be able to sign papers and move funds if necessary. You know how unpredictable my business can be? She took the document, her perfectly manicured fingers tracing the title. Wow, general power of attorney. That sounds serious. It is, I said, my voice soft. I looked her directly in the eyes. The light turned green, but I didn't move. The car behind us honked, a distant, irrelevant noise. It means you control everything. My personal accounts, the business accounts, stocks, properties, everything. If, God forbid, something happened to me, you'd be in charge. I tapped the signature line with my pen. I'm giving you the keys to the entire kingdom, Lena. Every dime I've ever earned. Every asset to my name. She looked from the paper to my face, her expression a perfect mask of awe and humility.
Alex, I don't know what to say. The trust you have in me?
Of course I trust you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I meant every word with every fiber of my being. I trust you more than I trust myself. And with that, I signed my name. I slid the document back into the folder and handed it to her. She put it in her designer handbag, which sat on the floor between her feet. The kingdom was now in her purse. The car behind me honked again, more insistently this time. I laughed, put the car in gear, and accelerated. We were back on our way, cruising down the highway, music playing, the golden sun warming our faces. We were invincible. The last thing I remember is Elena's scream. Not a scream of fear for me or for us. Looking back, it was a sharp, almost annoyed sound. Then, a deafening roar of metal twisting, the world spinning violently, and the universe shattering into a million pieces of glass. Then, nothing. Just a deep, silent, impenetrable black. I had just handed my assassin the weapon, the motive, and the opportunity. And I had done it with a smile on my face and love in my heart. I thought that was the worst moment of my life. I was wrong. So wrong. The worst was yet to come. Have you ever had one of those dreams where you know you're dreaming but you can't wake up? You're trapped behind your own eyes, screaming into a void that has no sound. That was my world for, well, I didn't know how long. Time didn't exist in the fog. It was an endless gray twilight of disjointed sensations. There were sounds. The rhythmic metronomic beep of a machine that became the soundtrack to my prison. The soft squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. Muffled voices that swam in and out of focus, like a radio station struggling to find a signal. Sometimes, a voice would cut through the static. A calm, warm voice. A nurse, I would later learn. Her name was Sarah.
Okay, Alex, we're just going to turn you on your side now. Help prevent bed sores. You're doing great. You're a fighter.
Her hands were gentle. Her presence was a small island of comfort in an ocean of nothingness. And then there was Elena's voice. In the beginning, it was there often. It was high-pitched, laced with a performative grief. It was a voice for an audience.
Oh, my Alex, my poor, poor baby. The doctors say, they don't know, but I'm here. I'm not leaving your side. You just have to wake up. Please, just wake up for me.
I tried. God, I tried. I would scream her name in my mind, trying to force a single muscle to twitch, a single eyelid to flutter. I'm here. Lena, I'm right here. But my body was a stone tomb. Then, her visits seemed to get shorter. The tearful monologues were replaced by distracted sighs and the incessant, quiet tapping of her phone screen. Her voice, when she did speak, was different when she thought no one was listening. It was impatient. One day, another voice joined hers. A man's voice. Low, familiar. It scraped at the edges of my memory, a key turning in a rusty lock.
Any change?
Mark, my business partner, my friend. The guy I'd played squash with every Tuesday. The man I'd trusted to have my back in the boardroom.
No, nothing. He's just lying there. The doctors are using words like persistent vegetative state. Honestly, Mark, I don't know how much more of this I can take. It's like a morgue in here.
Her voice lacked any of the grief it held when the nurses were around. It was just tired, annoyed.
I know, baby, I know. But we have to keep up appearances for a little while longer. The lawyer said the power of attorney is solid, but everything needs to look right.
Baby? The word ricocheted around the inside of my skull. Lawyer? Power of attorney? The document? The one I signed in the car? The keys to the kingdom?
What about the liquid assets? Did the transfer go through?
Cleared this morning. 7 figures. It's sitting in the new offshore account. Next, I'll start the process of selling off his stock portfolio. We need to move fast before the board gets suspicious of his absence.
And the house? The listing agent called again? She has a cash offer, but it's a little under asking.
Take it. A quick, clean sale is better than holding out for a few extra grand. We need to be liquid and gone. Think of it, Lena. No more living in his shadow. No more being Mrs. Alex Rylance. You'll just be you. And we'll be on a beach so far away from here, this will all feel like a bad dream.
A bad dream. He had no idea. I was living it. I was screaming, thrashing against the walls of my own mind. This couldn't be real. It was a coma-induced nightmare. My Lena, my loving wife, couldn't be doing this. And Mark, my friend? It was impossible. A fiction my broken brain had cooked up. But the whispers kept coming. Days, or maybe weeks, bled into one another. They spoke of selling my cars, my art collection, my company shares. They planned a life built on the ashes of mine, all while standing 2 feet from my bed. They were vultures picking my carcass clean before I was even dead. The most chilling part was the complete absence of guilt in their voices. It was just business. My entire life, my legacy, was a hostile takeover. And then, the final, coldest whisper.
The lawyer filed the divorce papers today.
Good. On what grounds?
Irreconcilable differences, complicated by catastrophic injury. It's perfect. I'm the grieving wife who just can't handle the trauma anymore. The victim. By the time he, expires, I'll be legally separated, and half of everything he owned will be mine by court order, on top of what we've already secured. It's airtight.
Divorce. The word was a blade of ice in my chest. She wasn't just robbing me, she was erasing me. She was methodically, legally, and financially deleting me from the world, ensuring that even if by some miracle I did wake up, I would wake up to absolutely nothing. A ghost with a pulse? It was in that moment, floating in the blackness, hearing those words, that something inside me shifted. The desperate hope I'd been clinging to, that this was all a nightmare, evaporated. And in its place, something else began to grow. It was cold. It was hard. It was a single, diamond-sharp point of focus. I stopped trying to wake up for her. I stopped screaming her name into the void. Instead, I started listening. I started planning. I used their whispers to build a map of their betrayal. Every stolen dollar, every sold-off piece of my life, I logged it away in the one place they couldn't touch. My mind. The fog in my head began to thin, burned away by the sheer heat of my rage. My motivation was no longer love. It was vengeance. I wasn't just going to wake up. I was going to come back from the dead, and I was going to bring hell with me. The next part of this story is where things get truly insane. So if you're not subscribed, now's the time. You don't want to miss what happens next. One day, I opened my eyes. It wasn't dramatic. There was no gasp for air, no sudden jolt. It was more like a slow fade-in. The blurry white shapes above me slowly resolved into acoustic ceiling tiles. The rhythmic beeping I'd heard for months was now painfully loud, an insistent, sharp metronome counting out the seconds of my new reality. My body felt alien, a leaden, useless thing that didn't belong to me. I tried to lift my hand and it barely twitched. A wave of panic washed over me, cold and sharp. I was awake, but I was still a prisoner. The nurse, Sarah, was the first one to notice. She was checking my vitals when her eyes met mine. They widened, and a slow, beautiful smile spread across her face.
Well, hello there, stranger. Welcome back to the world.
My voice, when I tried to use it, was a dry, rasping croak. Wah! Terror! The first few weeks were a blur of doctors, tests, and the grueling, humiliating reality of relearning how to use my own body. I was a CEO trapped in the body of an infant, learning to swallow again, learning to sit up. Every small victory was a monumental effort that left me shaking and drenched in sweat. Through it all, I asked one question over and over to every nurse and doctor who came into my room. Where is my wife? Where is Elena? I had to play the part. I was the loving husband, waking from a nightmare, desperate to see his angel. Inside, I was a coiled snake, waiting. Their answers were always evasive. A shared look, a gentle hand on my arm.
She hasn't been by in a while, Alex. We have a note in your file. Her contact information, it's no longer valid.
What do you mean, not valid? I'd ask, my voice cracking with perfectly feigned despair. There must be a mistake. They pitied me. This poor, broken man, abandoned by his wife in his hour of greatest need. They had no idea the fire that was burning behind my eyes. Their pity was a perfect camouflage. My physical therapy became my obsession. The pain was my fuel. Every agonizing stretch, every lift of a weight that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, was a step closer to my goal. My therapist, a no-nonsense guy named Mike, was impressed by my drive.
Man, I've never seen anyone push themselves this hard. What's your secret?
I have a deadline. I'd grunt, pushing through another rep. The real breakthrough came when Sarah, who had become more of a friend than a nurse, saw the torment in my eyes. One evening, after my therapy, she came into my room and quietly closed the door. She sat in the chair beside my bed, her expression serious.
Alex, I shouldn't be doing this. It's against hospital policy, but I can't stand to see you like this. You keep asking about your wife. You deserve to know the truth, but you have to promise me you'll stay calm.
I nodded, my heart starting to pound a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I knew what was coming. I had heard the whispers. But I needed to see it. I needed the proof. She handed me her personal tablet. Her finger trembled slightly as she tapped on a social media app. "A friend of a friend is a real estate agent," she said softly. "She posted this a few weeks ago. A congratulations on the big move kind of thing." She turned the screen towards me. And there it was, the final nail in the coffin of the man I used to be. It was a photograph, bright, sunny, sickeningly cheerful. Elena and Mark. They were standing on the deck of a stunning beachfront villa, the kind of place you see in travel magazines. The water behind them was a shade of turquoise so vivid it hurt to look at. They both held champagne flutes, their arms wrapped around each other. They were smiling, not just happy smiles, triumphant smiles, the smiles of people who had gotten away with murder. Mark was wearing my Patek Philippe watch, the one I got myself after closing my first major deal, the symbol of my hard work. It was on his wrist. Elena. She was glowing. She looked happier, more relaxed than I had ever seen her. The caption underneath the photo, posted by the real estate agent, read, "A huge congratulations to Elena Rylance and Mark Vesey on their new life in the Caymans. So thrilled I could help you find your slice of paradise. Future new beginnings. Arc Island life, or your power couple." I stared at the screen. The world around me dissolved. The beeping of the machines, the hum of the hospital AC, it all faded away. There was only that image, burning itself onto my retinas. The whispers in the dark were real. Every single one. I felt a strange, terrifying calm settle over me. The shock, the grief, the heartbreak, they were all there. But they were being frozen, layer by layer, by a rage so profound it was crystalline. It was pure. I handed the tablet back to Sarah. My hand was perfectly steady. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet and even. "You have no idea what you've just done for me." She looked at me, confused by my lack of an emotional outburst. She expected tears, screams, despair. She didn't understand. She hadn't just shown me proof of my wife's betrayal. She had just handed me a target. That night, I made my first phone call. It took me 10 minutes just to dial the numbers, my fingers still clumsy and weak. I called the one person I had left in the world who I knew I could trust implicitly. David Chen, my former CFO. He was a quiet, brilliant man who had been with me since the beginning. He picked up on the second ring.
Alex, is that really you? We all thought...
"I'm back, David," I said, my voice still rough but with a new edge of steel. "And I need your help. I need you to find me the most ruthless, bloodthirsty financial fraud attorney in this city. And I need you to be my ghost in the machine. I'm officially dead. No one can know I'm back. Not yet." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then David's voice came back, low and steady.
Whatever you need, Alex. Welcome back, boss. Let's go to war.
The war had begun, and they had no idea their enemy had just risen from the grave. The hospital room became my war room. By day, I was the recovering patient, meekly eating my Jell-O, pushing myself in physical therapy, smiling politely at the staff. But by night, I was a general, commanding my small, loyal army. David became my hands and eyes in the outside world. He smuggled in a burner phone and a laptop, which I kept hidden under my mattress. He set up encrypted communication channels. He was my ghost, digging through the digital ruins of my life, feeding me a steady stream of information that stoked the fires of my rage. The damage was worse than I could have imagined. They had been systematic. My stock portfolio, liquidated. My art and car collections, sold off at below-market prices through shady auction houses. My personal accounts drained to zero, and my company, they had systematically plundered it. Mark, using the authority I had foolishly entrusted him with, had approved massive, fraudulent bonus payments to himself and funneled millions into shell corporations that led directly to their offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. He had gutted my life's work from the inside out. And then there was the house, our home, sold. The place where I'd proposed to her, where we'd hosted Christmas parties, where I thought we would grow old. Gone, for cash. To a shell company that also traced back to Mark. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had erased every trace of our life together. Honestly, if you've ever felt that pit of your stomach dread, that cold shock of realizing the person you trust most is a complete stranger, drop a comment below. I genuinely need to know I'm not alone in feeling that level of ice-cold shock. The lawyer David found for me was a man named Julian Davies. He was in his late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a reputation for being a shark in a $1,000 suit. Our first meeting was a video call. I was sitting up in my hospital bed, looking pale and weak. I'm sure I wasn't what he was expecting.
Mr. Rylance, David has given me the broad strokes. It's an ugly situation. Your wife, using a legally sound general power of attorney, has effectively liquidated your assets with her associate.
She didn't just liquidate them, Mr. Davies, I said, my voice level. She stole them. The POA was for the maintenance of my affairs while I was on vacation for 3 weeks, not for a fire sale of my entire existence while I was in a coma. Davies steepled his fingers, his expression unreadable.
Proving intent will be difficult. The document you signed is broad. A good lawyer will argue she was acting in what she perceived to be your best interests, consolidating assets during a medical crisis.
And the divorce? I countered. The immediate transfer of funds to an offshore account in a country with no extradition treaty? The purchase of a multi-million-dollar property with her lover, my business partner? Does that sound like a grieving wife managing a crisis? A slow smile crept across Davies's face. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator that has just caught the scent of blood.
No, Mr. Rylance, it does not. It sounds like a conspiracy to commit fraud on a massive scale. It sounds delicious. What is it you want from me?
I don't want to just get my money back, Mr. Davies, I said, leaning closer to the laptop camera. That's the easy part. I want to ruin them. I want to leave them with nothing. I want them to feel the same helplessness I felt lying in that bed while they picked my life apart. I want to take back everything they stole, and then I want to take everything they have. I want them broken, legally, financially, emotionally. The shark's smile widened.
I believe we can do that, but it will require patience and a certain theatricality. We can't just sue them. We need to lure them into a trap they'll walk into themselves.
And so we began to build the trap. It was a masterpiece of financial engineering and psychological warfare. Davies brought in a team of forensic accountants who traced every single dollar that had been moved. David, my ghost, used his contacts in the tech world to set up a new, completely legitimate-looking venture capital firm. A shell company for all intents and purposes, but one with a flawless digital footprint, a slick website, and a roster of impressive and completely fictitious advisors. The bait had to be perfect. It had to appeal to Mark's two primary weaknesses, his greed and his ego. He saw himself as a visionary, a deal-maker, not just a common thief. He'd stolen my money, but in his mind, he had outsmarted me. We would use that arrogance against him. The project we invented was a cutting-edge biotech startup. Neurolink Dynamics, we called it. It was all buzzwords and bullshit, promising revolutionary brain-computer interface technology. It was exactly the kind of high-risk, high-reward venture that a newly minted multimillionaire with an overinflated sense of his own genius would find irresistible. While my physical body grew stronger, my mind was focused on this singular, dark purpose. I spent my days in agonizing physical therapy, learning to walk again. Every step on the treadmill was a step closer to the courtroom. Every weight I lifted was practice for carrying the burden of my own vengeance. My nights were spent on calls with Davies and David, meticulously planning every detail of the sting operation. We needed a front man, someone to pitch the deal to Mark. David found the perfect candidate, a former investment banker who had lost his license for slightly less than legal activities and now worked as a high-end consultant. For a hefty fee, he was more than happy to play the part of a slick VC guru. The plan was simple, yet elegant. Our consultant would approach Mark, not as a random cold call, but through a mutual acquaintance, making it seem organic. He would present Neuralink Dynamics as an exclusive, off-the-books investment opportunity for a select few, a chance to get in on the ground floor of the next Tesla or Google. We knew from David's intel that despite their wealth, Elena and Mark were burning through my money at an alarming rate. Lavish parties, private jets, luxury shopping sprees. They were consumers, not builders. The prospect of doubling or tripling their stolen fortune would be a temptation they couldn't resist. The goal was to get them to invest everything, every last stolen cent, to drain their offshore accounts and funnel it all directly into our waiting trap. Finally, the day came when I was discharged from the hospital. I didn't go back to a home because I no longer had one. David arranged for me to stay in a discreet corporate apartment under a false name. The world still believed Alex Rylance was either dead or a vegetable in a long-term care facility. And that's exactly how I wanted it. The ghost was out of the machine. I stood in the center of the anonymous beige apartment. I could walk, I could talk. I was stronger than I had been in months. But I was a man with no home, no company, no wife, and no name. I had nothing left to lose. And that made me the most dangerous man on earth. The first phase of the operation was a delicate dance. Our front man, a charismatic charlatan named Julian, made contact with Mark at a charity gala in the Caymans. We had arranged for him to be there, a ghost at their feast. Julian didn't approach Mark directly. He let Mark see him, schmoozing with local financiers, dropping names, creating an aura of exclusivity. He made himself the most interesting man in the room. It was Mark, just as we predicted, who made the first move. His ego wouldn't allow him to be left out of a potential deal. We had audio of the entire conversation from a micro-recorder on Julian's lapel. Listening to it from my sterile apartment thousands of miles away was a surreal experience.
Mark Vesey. I don't believe we've been introduced.
Julian Croft, a pleasure. You're the talk of the island, Mr. Vesey, the man with the Midas touch.
Julian laid it on thick, praising Mark's business acumen, his bold moves. He played to Mark's fantasy of himself as a brilliant tycoon, not a backstabbing parasite.
I like to think I know a good opportunity when I see one. You seem to be in a similar line of work.
Something like that. My partners and I are in the business of finding the future. We invest in ideas that will change the world. It's a very small, very private circle.
He dangled the bait. He spoke of Neuralink Dynamics in hushed, excited tones, hinting at patents and breakthrough trials. He made it sound like the best-kept secret in the investment world. And then, he did the most brilliant thing. He pulled back.
But listen, I'm boring you. This is a party. We're not here to talk shop. Besides, our current funding round is already oversubscribed. It was a pleasure meeting you, Mark.
He walked away, leaving Mark standing there, hook in mouth. The psychology was perfect. By making it exclusive and unavailable, he had made it irresistible. It took less than 24 hours for Mark to call the private number Julian had discreetly passed to a mutual acquaintance. The fish was on the line. Over the next few weeks, Julian expertly reeled him in. There were secretive video calls, encrypted documents, all brilliantly fabricated by David's team, and a constant sense of urgency and scarcity. We knew from the forensic accountants exactly how much money they had. Julian's final offer for a majority stake in the project was a figure just slightly above their total liquid net worth. He was asking for everything. I listened to the recordings of their final negotiation call. Elena was on the line too. Her voice was a mix of greed and a pathetic attempt at business savvy.
It's a lot of capital to tie up in one venture, Julian. We'd be almost completely illiquid.
Elena, with all due respect, this isn't a venture. It's a paradigm shift. We're projecting a 10x return within 18 months. You're not tying up capital. You're buying a dynasty. But the clock is ticking. I have a consortium in Zurich ready to wire the full amount by Friday. This is a one-time offer of professional courtesy, in or out.
There was a muffled conversation on their end. I could practically hear the gears of their greed grinding. The stolen money wasn't enough for them. It never is for people like that. They needed more.
We're in.
Those two words were the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The wire transfer was scheduled for the following Monday. Meanwhile, Davies was preparing the final checkmate. He had compiled a mountain of evidence. The illegal asset transfers, the fraudulent bonus payments, Mark's abuse of his corporate authority, their conspiracy. He had sworn affidavits from my company's board members, from the notary, who had witnessed the POA signing, who confirmed I had stated its purpose was for a 3-week vacation, and from a jilted ex-employee of Mark's who was happy to testify about his previous shady dealings. The final piece of the puzzle was the divorce hearing. Elena's lawyers had been pushing for a final judgment. She wanted the court to officially grant her half of the marital assets, the assets she had already stolen, to give her a veneer of legal legitimacy. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday. The day after their wire transfer was set to clear. The timing was poetic. They would walk into that courtroom feeling untouchable, believing their wealth had been multiplied, ready to hammer the final nail in my coffin. The day before the hearing, David sent me a confirmation, a single screenshot. It was a bank statement for our shell company. And on it, a new deposit. A massive 8-figure number, everything they had. They had walked, eyes wide open, right into the cage. That night, I didn't sleep. I stood by the window of my apartment looking out at the city lights. My city. I thought about the man I was before the crash. Trusting, a little naive, a man who believed in the inherent goodness of the people he loved. He was dead. He'd died on that highway. The man standing here now was someone else entirely. A ghost who had clawed his way back to the land of the living, not for love or for life, but for a single, defining purpose: retribution. Tomorrow wasn't just a court date, it was an execution, and I would be the one to swing the axe. The courtroom was exactly as you'd imagine it: polished wood, drab colors, and an air of tired, bureaucratic gravity. I sat in a small conference room with Davies and David, listening to the muffled sounds of the proceedings next door. I had arrived through a private entrance, a ghost slipping into the back rooms of justice. No one knew I was there. Davies checked his watch, a thin smile on his lips.
Showtime is in 5 minutes. Are you ready, Alex?
I nodded. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry anymore. I was serene. A profound, icy calm had settled over me. I had visualized this moment 1,000 times in my hospital bed. I had played it over and over in my mind during every painful physical therapy session. This was not an act of passion. This was a calculated, deliberate demolition. David patted my shoulder.
They're going to be so surprised.
Surprised, I said, my voice a low murmur. Is that what we're calling it? We could hear the court clerk call the case. In the matter of the divorce of Elena Rylance and Alex Rylance, Davies smoothed his tie.
That's my cue. Remember, wait for my signal.
He walked out, and David and I watched the proceedings on a small CCTV monitor. Elena was there, looking like $1 million, or rather, like the 20 million she thought she had. She was dressed in a chic, sober designer suit, the picture of a grieving, wronged woman. Mark sat in the gallery just behind her, her rock, her support system. He looked smug, confident, like a man who owned the world. They were whispering to her lawyer, occasionally laughing softly. They looked like they were at a country club, not a divorce court. Her lawyer, a slick man with too much gel in his hair, began his presentation. He spoke of my tragic, debilitating accident and Elena's unbearable emotional toll. He painted a picture of a devoted wife who had been forced to make the heart-wrenching decision to move on with her life. He submitted documents to finalize the division of assets, a mere formality, he claimed, to close this painful chapter. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed the paperwork with a bored expression.
And where is the respondent, Mr. Rylance? Is he represented?
Elena's lawyer gestured vaguely.
Your Honor, Mr. Rylance remains in a non-responsive state. He is, for all legal intents and purposes, incapacitated. We have medical records to that effect.
This was Davies's moment. He stood up from his seat at the back of the courtroom.
Your Honor, I apologize for my tardiness. Julian Davies. I am here to represent the respondent, Mr. Alex Rylance.
A ripple of confusion went through the room. Elena and Mark exchanged a look. Her lawyer sputtered.
Objection. Who is this? My client was not informed of any representation.
Overruled. A man has a right to counsel. Mr. Davies, your client's medical state suggests he is unable to instruct you.
Davies gave his shark's smile.
On the contrary, Your Honor. My client has been giving me very clear, very precise instructions for several weeks now. In fact, he is here today and wishes to address the court himself.
Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Elena's face went pale. Mark stopped smiling. They looked toward the courtroom doors, their confident expressions melting into pure, unadulterated shock. That was my signal. I pushed open the door and walked in. I wasn't the broken man from the hospital. I wore a perfectly tailored suit. I walked with no limp, no cane. I was thinner, yes, and there were scars on my face that hadn't been there before, and my eyes were cold. I walked past the gallery, my gaze locked on Elena. Her jaw dropped. A small, strangled gasp escaped her lips. She looked like she had seen a ghost, which, in a way, she had. Mark's face was a mask of disbelief and terror. The color drained from his face as if a plug had been pulled. I stopped at the respondent's table next to Davies. I looked at the judge. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and strong, echoing in the silent room. "My name is Alex Rylance. Reports of my incapacitation have been greatly exaggerated." The next hour was a blur of legal carnage. Davies didn't just counter the divorce petition, he went on the offensive. He presented the evidence, piece by painstaking piece. The bank statements showing the systematic draining of my accounts, beginning just days after my accident. The timeline proving the funds were transferred offshore within hours of liquidation. The forged company documents authorizing Mark's bonuses. The affidavit from the notary about the true purpose of the power of attorney. He presented the real estate records from the Cayman Islands, showing the purchase of their love nest, bought and paid for with my money. He showed their social media posts, their triumphant smiles, their champagne toasts while I lay in a coma. With every new piece of evidence, Elena shrank further into her chair. Her lawyer was speechless, frantically shuffling through papers that were now useless. Mark looked like he was going to be physically ill. And then, Davies delivered the coup de grace.
Your Honor, while my client was recovering, Mrs. Rylance and her partner, Mr. Vesey, recently made what they believed to be a very lucrative investment. They pooled all of their assets, all of my client's stolen assets, and invested them in a promising new biotech firm called Neurolink Dynamics.
He paused, letting the name hang in the air. Mark looked up, a flicker of confusion in his eyes.
As it happens, Your Honor, the majority shareholder and sole beneficiary of Neurolink Dynamics' holding company is my client, Mr. Alex Rylance. Yesterday morning, Mrs. Rylance and Mr. Vesey, of their own free will, wired every last cent they had stolen directly back into an account that I control on my client's behalf.
He placed a final document on the judge's bench.
They came here today to claim half of my client's estate. The truth is, they have nothing, less than nothing. They are, for all legal intents and purposes, completely and utterly bankrupt.
The silence was broken by a choked sob from Elena. It wasn't a sound of remorse. It was the sound of a spoiled child who had just had her favorite toy taken away. Mark just stared into space, his mind clearly unable to process the sheer scale of his own destruction. I looked at Elena. For the first time, I looked directly at her. There was no love, no hate, just nothing. She was a stranger. A failed business transaction. "It was never just about the money, Lena," I said, my voice just loud enough for her to hear. "It was about the trust. You broke it. So I broke you." The judge cleared her throat, her face a mixture of shock and grim satisfaction.
In light of this evidence, the petition for divorce is granted. The division of assets is moot, as there are no marital assets to divide on the petitioner's side. Furthermore, I am referring this entire case to the District Attorney's Office for immediate investigation into conspiracy, grand larceny, and financial fraud.
It was over. That was 6 months ago. Elena and Mark were arrested an hour after they left the courthouse. The DA had a field day with the case Davies handed them on a silver platter. Mark, facing decades in prison for corporate fraud, turned on Elena to save himself, detailing every sordid part of their plan. Not that it helped him much. They were both convicted. They lost everything: their freedom, their reputation, their stolen paradise. I got everything back: the money, the company, even the house, which Davies' team clawed back from the shell company Mark had used to buy it. I sold it immediately. I couldn't set foot in it again. I'm standing now in the corner office of my new building. It's twice the size of my old one, with a panoramic view of the city I fought to reclaim. My company is thriving, larger and more successful than ever before. The ordeal forced me to restructure, to be leaner, smarter, more ruthless. Sometimes, late at night, I look out at the endless sea of lights and think about the man I used to be. The man who trusted unconditionally, who loved with an open heart. He's gone. The man who replaced him is harder, colder. He understands that the world isn't a movie with a happy ending. It's a boardroom, and you either close the deal or get pushed out. The betrayal nearly destroyed me. The coma didn't break me, but the whispers in the dark almost did. But in the end, they were a gift. They burned away all my illusions and left behind a core of tempered steel. Elena thought she was taking everything from me: my money, my home, my future. But she made a fatal miscalculation. She took all the things I had, but she left me with the one thing I am. She left me with myself. And that was more than enough to take it all back.